Hello. Welcome back to Boring Fantasy for Sleep. Tonight is episode 7 of The King of Elfland's Daughter by Lord Dunsany. In episode 6, the Parliament of Earl gathered again in the long stone hall where this story began. 12 old men in their habitual chairs, sitting with what they cannot change. They got what they asked for. A lord with magic blood, a connection to Elfland, and it cost them more than they imagined it would. They do not regret it. They would ask again. And Alveric wandered further east, day after day, finding nothing where Elfland used to be. And Lurulu, back in Elfland, told the creatures there about the mortal world, about smoke rising from chimneys, about bread, about the sound of a dog on a cold morning. And the creatures of Elfland listened and found it wonderful and did not entirely understand why. Neither do we entirely. Tonight, we stay with Lurulu for a while. We watch through his eyes as he watches the ways of men, the small, ordinary things that the mortal world does every day without knowing how extraordinary they are. And Alveric's quest continues, the years accumulating, the border always further than the day before, and Lyrazel, in Elfland, remembers. She stands in the immortal world she was born to, surrounded by beauty that does not change and light that does not fade, and she thinks about the fields we know, about the grey mornings, about the cold, about the particular quality of a life that ends, and the elf king watches his daughter remember and understands what he has done. This is episode 7, Lurulu Watches the Earth, chapters 21, 22, 23, and 24.
Chapter 21. On the verge of Earth. And on that day, Orion rested his hounds. But the next day he rose early and went to his kennels and loosened the joyous hounds in the shining morning and led them out of the valley and over the downs towards the frontier of twilight again. And he took his bow with him no more, but only his sword and his whip, for he had come to love the joy of his 15 hounds when they hunted the one-horned monster, and felt that he shared the joy of every hound, while to shoot one with an arrow would be but a single joy. All day he went over the fields, greeting some farmer here and there, or worker in the field, and gaining greetings in return, and good wishes for sport. But when evening came, and he was near the frontier, fewer and fewer greeted him as he passed, for he was manifestly travelling where none went, whence even their thoughts held back. So he went lonely, yet cheered by his eager thoughts, and happy in the comradeship of his hounds. And both his thoughts and his hounds were all for the chase. And so he came to the barrier of twilight again, where the hedges ran down to it from the fields of men, and turned strange and dim in a glow that is not of our earth, and disappeared in the twilight. He stood with his hounds close in against one of these hedges, just where it touched the barrier. The light just there on the hedge, if like anything of our earth, was like the misty dimness that flashes upon a hedge, seen only across one field, when touched by the rainbow. In the sky, the rainbow is clear, but close across one wide field, the rainbow's end scarcely shows. Yet a heavenly strangeness has touched and altered the hedge. In some such light as that glowed the last of the hawthorns that grew in the fields of men, and just beyond it, like a liquid opal, all full of wandering lights, lay the barrier through which no man can see, and no sound come but the sound of the elfin horns, and only that to the ears of very few. The horns were blowing now, piercing that barrier of dim light and silence with the magical resonance of their silver note that seemed to beat past all things intervening to come to Orion's ear, as the sunlight beats through ether to illumine the veils of the moon. The horns died down, and nothing whispered from Elfland, and all the sounds thenceforth were the sounds of an earthly evening. Even these grew few, and still no unicorns came. A dog barked far away. A cart, the sole sound on an empty road, went homeward wearily, and someone spoke in a lane, and then left the silence unbroken, for words seemed to offend the hush that was over all our fields, and in the hush, Orion gazed at the frontier, watching for the unicorns that never came, expecting each moment to see one step through the twilight. But he had done unwisely in coming to the same spot at which he had found the 5 unicorns only 2 days before. For of all creatures, the unicorns are the wariest, guarding their beauty from the eye of man with never ceasing watchfulness, dwelling all day beyond the fields we know, and only entering them rarely at evening, when all is still, and with the utmost vigilance, and venturing even then scarcely beyond the edges. To come on such animals twice at the same spot within 2 days with hounds, after hunting and killing one of them, was more unlikely than Orion thought. But his heart was full of the triumph of his hunt, and the scene of it lured him back to it in the way that such scenes have. And now he gazed at the frontier, waiting for one of these great creatures to come proudly through, a great tangible shape out of the dim opalescence. And no unicorn came, and standing gazing there so long, that curious boundary began to lure him till his thoughts went roaming with its wandering light, and he desired the peaks of Elfland. And well, they knew that lure, who dwelt on those farms lying all along the edge of the fields we know, and wisely kept their eyes turned ever away from that wonder that lay with its marvel of colours so near to the backs of their houses. For there was a beauty in it, such as is not in all our fields, and it is told those farmers in youth how, if they gaze upon those wandering light, there will remain no joy for them in the goodly fields, the fine brown froes or the waves of wheat, or in any things of ours, but their hearts will be far from here with elfin things, yearning always for unknown mountains, and for folk not blessed by the freer. And standing now, while our earthly evening waned, upon the very edge of that magical twilight, the things of earth rushed swiftly from his remembrance, and suddenly all his care was for elfin things. Of all the folk that trod the paths of men, he remembered only his mother, and suddenly knew, as though the twilight had told him, that she was enchanted, and he of a magical line. And none had told him this, but he knew it now. For years he had wandered through many an evening, and guessed where his mother was gone. He had guessed in lonely silence. None knew what the child was guessing, and now an answer seemed to hang in the air. It seemed as though she were only a little way off, across the enchanted twilight that divided those farms from Elfland. He moved 3 steps and came to the frontier itself. His foot was the furthest that stood in the fields we know. Against his face the frontier lay like a mist, in which all the colours of pearls were dancing gravely. A hound stirred as he moved. The pack turned their heads and eyed him. He stood, and they rested again. He tried to see through the barrier, but saw nothing but wandering lights that were made by the massing of twilights from the ending of thousands of days. which had been preserved by magic to build that barrier there. Then he called to his mother across that mighty gap, those few paces of airy twilight lying over the fields, which had upon one side earth and the haunts of men, and the time that we measure by minutes and hours and years, and upon the other Elfland and another way of time. He called to her twice, and listened, and called again, and never a cry or a whisper came out of Elfland. He felt then the magnitude of the gulf that divided him from her, and knew it to be vast and dark and strong, like the gulfs that set apart our times from a bygone day, or that stand between daily life and the things of dream, or between folk tilling the earth and the heroes of song, or between those living yet and those they mourn. And the barrier twinkled and sparkled, as though so airy a thing never divided lost years from that fleeing hour called now. He stood there, with the cries of earth faint in the late evening behind him, and the mellow glow of the soft earthly twilight. And before him, close to his face, the utter silence of Elfland, and the barrier that made that silence, gleaming with its strange beauty. And now he thought no more of earthly things, but only gazed into that wall of twilight, as prophets tampering with forbidden lore gaze into cloudy crystals. And to all that was elvish in Orion's blood, to all that he had of magic from his mother, the little lights of the twilight-builded boundary lured and tempted and beckoned. He thought of his mother, dwelling in lonely ease beyond the rage of time. He thought of the glories of Elfland, dimly known by magical memories that he had had from his mother. The little cries of the earthly evening behind him, he heeded no more, nor heard. And with all these little cries were lost to him also the ways and the needs of men, the things they plan, the things they toil for and hope for, and all the little things their patience achieves. In the new knowledge that had come to him beside this glittering boundary, that he was of magical blood, he desired at once to cast off his allegiance to time, and to leave the lands that lay under time's dominion, and were ever scourged by his tyranny, to leave them with no more than 5 short paces, and to enter the ageless land where his mother sat with her father, while he reigned on his misty throne, in that hall of bewildering beauty at which only song has guessed. No more was Earl his home, no more were the ways of man his ways, their fields to his feet no more. But the peaks of the elfin mountains were to him now what welcoming eaves of straw are to earthly labourers at evening. The fabulous, the unearthly, were to Orion home. Thus had that barrier of twilight, too long seen, enchanted him. So much more magical was it than any earthly evening. And there are those that might have gazed long at it, and even yet turned away. But not easily Orion, for though magic has power to charm worldly things, they respond to enchantment heavily and slowly, while all that was magic in Orion's blood flashed answer to the magic that shone in the rampart of Elfland. It was made of the rarest lights that wander in air, and the fairest flashes of sunlight that astonish our fields through storm, and the mists of little streams, and the glow of flowers in moonlight, and all the ends of our rainbows, with all their beauty and magic, and scraps of the gloaming of evenings long treasured in aged minds. Into this enchantment he stepped to have done with mundane things, but as his foot touched the twilight, a hound that had sat behind him under the hedge, held back from the chase so long, stretched its body a little, and uttered one of those low cries of impatience that amongst the ways of man most nearly resembles a yawn. And old habit, at that sound, made Orion turn his head and he saw the hound and went up to him for a moment and patted him and would have said farewell. But all the hounds were around him then, nosing his hands and looking up at his face. And standing there, amongst his eager hounds, Orion, who but a moment before was dreaming of fabulous things with thoughts that floated over the magical lands and scaled the enchanted peaks of the elfin mountains, was suddenly at the call of his earthly lineage. It was not that he cared more to hunt than to be with his mother beyond the fret of time, in the lands of her father, lovelier than anything song hath said. It was not that he loved his hounds so much that he could not leave them, but his fathers had followed the chase, age after age, as his mother's line had timelessly followed magic, and the call towards magic was strong while he looked on magical things, and the old earthly line was as strong to beckon him to the chase. The beautiful boundary of twilight had drawn his desires towards Elfland. Next moment, his hounds had turned him another way. It is hard for any of us to avoid the grip of external things. For some moments, Orion stood thinking among his hounds, trying to decide which way to turn, trying to weigh the easy, lazy ages that hung over untroubled lawns and the listless glories of Elfland, with the good brown plough and the pasture and the little hedges of earth. But the hounds were around him, nosing, crying, looking into his eyes, speaking to him if tails and paws and large brown eyes can speak, saying, "Away, away." To think amongst all that tumult was impossible. He could not decide, and the hounds had it their way, and he and they went, together, home over the fields we know. Chapter 22. Orion appoints a whip. And many times again, while the winter wore away, Orion went back again, with his hounds to that wonderful boundary, and waited there while the earthly twilight faded, and sometimes saw the unicorns come through, craftily, silently, when our fields were still, great, beautiful shapes of white. But he brought back no more horns to the castle of Earl, nor hunted again across the fields we know. For the unicorns, when they came, moved into our fields no more than a few bare paces, and Orion was not able to cut one off again. Once, when he tried, he nearly lost all his hounds, some being already within the boundary when he beat them back with his whip. Another 2 yards and the sound of his earthly horn could never more have reached them. It was this that taught him that for all the power that he had over his hounds, and even though in that power was something of magic, yet one man without help could not hunt hounds, so near to that edge, over which if one should stray, it would be lost forever. After this, Orion watched the lads at their games in evenings at Earl, till he had marked 3 that in speed and strength seemed to excel the rest, and 2 of these he chose to be whippers in. He went to the cottage of one of them when the games were over, just as the lights were lit, a tall lad with great speed of limb. The lad and his mother were there, and both rose from the table as the father opened the door and Orion came in. And cheerily, Orion asked the lad if he would come with the hounds and carry a whip and prevent any from straying. And a silence fell. All knew that Orion hunted strange beasts and took his hounds to strange places. None there had ever stepped beyond the fields we know. The lad feared to pass beyond them. His parents were full loth to let him go. At length, the silence was broken by excuses and muttered sentences and unfinished things, and Orion saw that the lad would not come. He went then to the house of the other. There too the candles were lit, and a table spread. There were 2 old women there, and the lad at their supper. And to them, Orion told how he needed a whipper-in, and asked the lad to come. Their fear in that house was more marked. The old women cried out together that the lad was too young, that he could not run so well as he used to, that he was not worthy of so great an honour, that dogs never would trust him, and much more than this, they said, till they became incoherent. Orion left them and went to the house of the third. It was the same here. The elders had desired magic for Earl, but the actual touch of it, or the mere thought of it, perturbed the folk in their cottages. None would spare their sons to go whither they knew not, to have dealings with things that rumour, like a large and sinister shadow, had so grimly magnified in the hamlet of Earl. So Orion went alone with his hounds, when he took them up from the valley, and went eastwards over our fields, where Earth's folk would not go. It was late in the month of March, and Orion slept in his tower, when there came up to him from far below, shrill and clear in the early morning, the sound of his peacocks calling. The bleat of sheep far up on the downs came to wake him too, and cocks were crowing clamorously, for spring was singing through the sunny air. He rose and went to his hounds, and soon early labourers saw him go up the steep side of the valley with all his hounds behind him, tan patches against the green. And so he passed over the fields we know, and so he was come, before the sun had set, to that strip of land from which all men turned away, where westward stood men's houses among fields of fat brown clay, and eastward the elfin mountains shone over the boundary of twilight. He went with his hounds along the last hedge, down to the boundary, and no sooner had he come there than he saw a fox quite close slip out of the twilight between Earth and Elfland, and run a few yards along the edge of our fields, and then slip back again. And of this, Orion thought nothing, for it is the way of the fox or thus to haunt the edge of Elfland, and to return again to our fields. It is thus that he brings us something of which none of our cities guess. But soon the fox appeared, again out of the twilight, and ran a little way, and was back in the luminous barrier once more. Then Orion watched to see what the fox was doing, and yet again it appeared in the field we know, and dodged back into the twilight. And the hounds watched too, and showed no longing to hunt it, for they had tasted fabulous blood. Orion walked along beside the twilight in the direction in which the fox was going, with his curiosity growing the more that the fox dodged in and out of our fields. The hounds followed him slowly, and soon lost their interest in what the fox was doing. And all at once, the curious thing was explained, for Lurulu all of a sudden skipped through the twilight, and that troll appeared in our fields. It was with him that the fox was playing. "A man," said Lurulu aloud to himself, or to his comrade the fox, speaking in troll talk. And all at once, Orion remembered the troll that had come into his nursery with his little charm against time, and had leaped from shelf to shelf and across the ceiling and enraged Zirundarul, who had feared for her crockery. "The troll," he said, also in troll talk, for his mother had murmured it to him as a child when she told him tales of the trolls and their age-old songs. "Who is this that knows troll talk?" said Lurulu. And Orion told his name, and this meant nothing to Lurulu. But he squatted down and rummaged a little while in what answers in trolls to our memory. And during his ransacking of much trivial remembrance that had eluded the destruction of time in the fields we know, and the listless apathy of unchanging ages in Elfland, he came all at once on his remembrance of Earl, and looked at Orion again, and began to cogitate. And at this same moment, Orion told to the troll the august name of his mother. At once, Lurulu made what is known amongst the trolls of Elfland as the abasement of the 5 points. That is to say, he bowed himself to the ground on his 2 knees, his 2 hands, and his forehead. Then he sprang up again with a high leap into the air, for reverence rested not on his spirit long. "What are you doing in men's fields?" said Orion. "Playing," said Lurulu. "What do you do in Elfland?" "Watch time," said Lurulu. "That would not amuse me," said Orion. "You've never done it," said Lurulu. "You cannot watch time in the fields of men." "Why not?" asked Orion. "It moves too fast." Orion pondered a while on this, but could make nothing of it, because never having gone from the fields we know, he knew only one pace of time, and so had no means of comparison. "How many years have gone over you?" asked the troll, "since we spoke in Earl?" "Years," said Orion. 100, guessed the troll. "Nearly 12, said Orion. "And you?" "It is still today," said the troll. And Orion would not speak any more of time, for he cared not for the discussion of a subject of which he appeared to know less than a common troll. "Will you carry a whip," he said, "and run with my hounds when we hunt the unicorn over the fields we know?" Lurulu looked searchingly at the hounds, watching their brown eyes. The hounds turned doubtful noses towards the troll and sniffed inquiringly. "They are dogs," said the troll, as though that were against them. "Yet they have pleasant thoughts." "You will carry the whip then," said Orion. Yes, yes, said the troll. So Orion gave him his own whip there and then, and blew his horn and went away from the twilight, and told Lurulu to keep the hounds together and to bring them on behind him. And the hounds were uneasy at the sight of the troll, and sniffed again, but could not make him human, and were loth to obey a creature no larger than them. They ran up to him through curiosity, and ran away in disgust, and straggled through disobedience. But the boundless resources of that nimble troll were not thus easily thwarted, and the whip went suddenly up, looking 3 times as large in that tiny hand, and the lash flew forward and cracked on the tip of a hound's nose. The hound yelped, then looked astonished, and the rest were uneasy still. They must have thought it an accident, but again the lash shot forward and cracked on another nose tip, and the hounds saw then that it was not chance that guided those stinging shots, but a deadly, unerring eye. And from that time on, they reverenced Lurulu, although he never smelt human. So went Orion and his pack of hounds in the late evening homewards, and no sheepdog kept the flock on wolf-haunted wolds safer or closer than Lurulu kept the pack. He was on each flank or behind them, wherever a straggler was, and could leap right over the pack from side to side. And the pale blue elfin mountains faded from view before Orion had gone from the frontier as much as 100 paces, for their gloomless peaks were hid by the earthly darkness that was deepening wide over the fields we know. Homeward they went, and soon there appeared above them the wandering multitude of our earth-seen stars. Lurulu now and then looked up to marvel at them, as we have all done at some time. But for the most part, he fixed his attention on the hounds. For now that he was in earthly fields, he was concerned with the things of earth. And never one hound loitered, but that Lurulu's whip would touch him with its tiny explosion, perhaps on the tip of its tail, scattering a little dust of fragments of hair and whipcord. And the hound would yelp and run into the others. And all the pack would know that another of those unerring shots had gone home. A certain grace with a whip, a certain sureness of aim, comes when a life is devoted to the carrying of a whip amongst hounds. Comes, say, in 20 years, and sometimes it runs in families. And that is better than years of practice. But neither years of practice nor the wont of the whip in the blood can give the certain aim that one thing can, and that one thing is magic. The hurl of the lash, as immediate as the sudden turn of an eye, its flash to a chosen spot as direct as sight, were not of this earth. And though the cracks of that whip might have seemed to passing men to be no more than the work of an earthly huntsman, yet not a hound, but knew that there was in it more than this, a thing from beyond our fields. There was a touch of dawn in the sky, when Orion saw again the village of Earl, sending up pillars of smoke from early fires below him, and came with his hounds and his new whipper. In down the side of the valley, early windows winked at him as he went down the street and came in the silence and chill to the empty kennels. And when the hounds were all curled up on their straw, he found a place for Lurulu, a mouldering loft in which were sacks and a few heaps of hay. From a pigeon loft just beyond it, some of the pigeons had strayed and dwelt all along the rafters. There, Orion left Lurulu and went to his tower, cold with the want of sleep and food, and weary as he would not have been if he had found a unicorn. But the noise of the troll's chatter when he had found him on the frontier had made it useless to watch for those wary beasts that evening. Orion slept, but the troll in the mouldering loft sat long on his bundle of hay, observing the ways of time. He saw through cracks in old shutters the stars go moving by. He saw them pale. He saw the other light spread. He saw the wonder of sunrise. He felt the gloom of the loft, all full of the coo of the pigeons. He watched their restless ways. He heard wild birds stir in near elms, and men abroad in the morning, and horses and carts and cows, and everything changing as the morning grew. A land of change. The decay of the boards in the loft, and the moss outside in the mortar, and old lumber mouldering away, all seemed to tell the same story. Change, and nothing abiding. He thought of the age-old calm that held the beauty of Elfland, and then he thought of the tribe of trolls he had left, wondering what they would think of the ways of earth. And the pigeons were suddenly terrified by wild peals of Lurulu's laughter. Chapter 23. Lurulu watches the restlessness of earth. As the day wore on, and still Orion slept heavily, and even the hounds lay silent in their kennels a little way off, and the coming and going of men and carts below had nothing to do with the troll, Lurulu began to feel lonely. So thick are the brown trolls in the dells they inhabit that none feels lonely there. They sit there silent, enjoying the beauty of Elfland or their own impudent thoughts, or at rare moments when Elfland is stirred from its deep natural calm, their laughter floods the dells. They were no more lonely there than rabbits are. But in all the fields of earth, there was only one troll, and that troll felt lonely. The door of the pigeon loft was open some 10 feet from the door of the hayloft, and some 6 feet higher. A ladder led to the hayloft, clamped to the wall with iron, but nothing at all communicated with the pigeon loft, lest cats should go that way. From it came the murmur of abundant life, which attracted the lonely troll. The jump from door to door was nothing to him, and he landed in the pigeon loft in his usual attitude, with a look of impudent welcome upon his face. But the pigeons poured away on a roar of wings through their windows. And the troll was still lonely. He liked the pigeon loft as soon as he looked at it. He liked the signs that he saw of teeming life, the 100 little houses of slate and plaster, the myriad feathers, and the musty smell. He liked the age-old ease of the sleepy loft and the huge spider's webs that draped the corners, holding years and years of dust. He did not know what cobwebs were, never having seen them in Elfland, but he admired their workmanship, the age of the pigeon loft that had filled the corners with cobwebs and broken patches of plaster away from the wall, showing ruddy bricks beneath, and laid bare the laths in the roof, and even the slates beyond gave to the dreamy place an air not unlike to the calm of Elfland. But below it, and all around Lurulu, noted the restlessness of earth. Even the sunlight, through the little ventilation holes that shone on the wall, moved. Presently, there came the roar of the pigeons' returning wings, and the crash of their feet on the slate roof above him. But they did not yet come in again to their homes. He saw the shadow of this roof cast on another roof below him, and the restless shadows of the pigeons along the edge. He observed the grey lichen covering most of the lower roof, and the neat, round patches of newer yellow lichen on the shapeless mass of the grey. He heard a duck call out slowly, 6 or 7 times. He heard a man come into a stable below him and lead a horse away. A hound woke and cried out. Some jackdaws, disturbed from some tower, passed over high in the air with boisterous voices. He saw big clouds go hurrying along the tops of far hills. He heard a wild pigeon call from a neighbouring tree. Some men went by talking, and after a while, he perceived to his astonishment what he had had no leisure to notice on his previous visit to Earl, that even the shadows of houses moved. For he saw that the shadow of the roof under which he sat had moved a little on the roof below, over the grey and yellow lichen. Perpetual movement and perpetual change. He contrasted it, in wonder, with the deep calm of his home, where the moment moved more slowly than the shadows of houses here, and did not pass until all the content with which a moment is stored had been drawn from it by every creature in Elfland. And then, with a whirring and whining of wings, the pigeons began to come back. They came from the tops of the battlements of the highest tower of Earl, on which they had sheltered a while, feeling guarded by its great height and its hoary age from this strange new thing that they feared. They came back and sat on the sills of their little windows and looked in with one eye at the troll. Some were all white, but the grey ones had rainbow-coloured necks that were scarce less lovely than those colours that made the splendour of Elfland. And Lurulu, as they watched him suspiciously, where he sat still in a corner, longed for their dainty companionship. And when these restless children of a restless air and earth still would not enter, he tried to soothe them with the restlessness to which they were accustomed, and in which he believed all folk that dwelt in our fields delighted. He leaped up suddenly. He sprang on to a slate-built house for a pigeon high on a wall. He darted across to the next wall and back to the floor. But there was an outcry of wings, and the pigeons were gone. And gradually, he learned that the pigeons preferred stillness. Their wings roared back soon to the roof. Their feet thumped and clicked on the slates again. But not for long did they return to their homes. And the lonely troll looked out of their windows, observing the ways of earth. He saw a water wagtail light on the roof below him. He watched it until it went, and then 2 sparrows came to some corn that had been dropped on the ground. He noted them too. Each was an entirely new genus to the troll, and he showed no more interest as he watched every movement of the sparrows than should we if we met with an utterly unknown bird. When the sparrows were gone, the duck quacked again, so deliberately that another 10 minutes passed, while Lurulu tried to interpret what it was saying. And although he desisted, then, because other interests attracted him, he felt sure it was something important. Then the jackdaws tumbled by again, but their voices sounded frivolous, and Lurulu did not give them much attention. To the pigeons on the roof that would not come home, he listened long, not trying to interpret what they were saying, yet satisfied with the case as the pigeons put it, feeling that they told the story of life, and that all was well. And he felt as he listened to the low talk of the pigeons that Earth must have been going on for a long time. Beyond the roofs, the tall trees rose up, leafless except for evergreen oaks, and some laurels and pines and yews, and the ivy that climbed up trunks. But the buds of the beech were getting ready to burst, and the sunlight glittered and flashed on the buds and leaves, and the ivy and laurel shone. A breeze passed by, and some smoke drifted from some near chimney. Far away, Lurulu saw a huge grey wall of stone that circled a garden, all asleep in the sun, and clear in the sunlight, he saw a butterfly sail by and swoop when it came to the garden. And then he saw 2 peacocks go slowly past. He saw the shadow of the roofs darkening the lower part of the shining trees. He heard a cock crow somewhere, and a hound spoke out again. And then a sudden shower rained on the roofs, and at once the pigeons wanted to come home. They alighted outside their little windows again, and all looked sideways at the troll. Lurulu kept very still this time, and after a while, the pigeons, though they saw that he was by no means one of themselves, agreed that he did not belong to the tribe of cat, and returned at last to the street of their tiny houses, and there continued their curious, age-old tale. And Lurulu longed to repay them with curious tales of the trolls, the treasured legends of Elfland, but found that he could not make them understand troll talk. So he sat and listened to them talking, till it seemed to him they were trying to lull the restlessness of earth, and thought that they might by drowsy incantation be putting some spell against time, through which it could not come to harm their nests. For the power of time was not made clear to him yet, and he knew not yet that nothing in our fields has the strength to hold out against time. The very nests of the pigeons were built on the ruins of old nests, on a solid layer of crumbled things that time had made in that pigeon loft, as outside it the strata are made from the ruins of hills. So vast and ceaseless, a ruin was not yet clear to the troll, for his sharp understanding had only been meant to guide him through the lull and the calm of Elfland, and he busied himself with a tinier consideration. For seeing that the pigeons seemed now amicable, he leapt back to his hayloft and returned with a bundle of hay, which he put down in a corner to make himself comfortable there. When the pigeons saw all this movement, they looked at him sideways again, jerking their necks queerly, but in the end decided to accept the troll as a lodger, and he curled up on his hay and listened to the history of Earth, which he believed the tale of the pigeons to be, though he did not know their language. But the day wore on, and hunger came on the troll, far sooner than ever it did in Elfland, where even when he was hungry, he had no more to do than to reach up and take the berries that hung low from the trees, that grew in the forest that bordered the dells of the trolls. And it is because the trolls eat them whenever hunger comes on them, which it rarely does, that these curious fruits are called trollberries. He leaped now from the pigeon loft and scampered abroad, looking all round for trollberries. And there were no berries at all, for there is but one season for berries, as we know well. It is one of the tricks of time. But that all the berries on earth should pass away for a period was to the troll too astounding to be comprehended at all. He was all among farm buildings, and presently he saw a rat humping himself slowly along through a dark shed. He knew nothing of rat talk, but it is a curious thing that when any two folk are after the same thing, each somehow knows what the other is after, at once, as soon as he sees him. We are all partially blind to other folks' occupations, but when we meet anyone engaged in our own pursuit, then somehow we soon seem to know without being told. And the moment that Lurulu saw the rat in the shed, he seemed to know that it was looking for food. So he followed the rat quietly, and soon the rat came up to a sack of oats, and to open that took him no longer than it does to shell a row of peas. And soon he was eating the oats. "Are they good?" said the troll in troll talk. The rat looked at him dubiously, noting his resemblance to man, and on the other hand, his unlikeness to dogs. But on the whole, the rat was dissatisfied, and after a long look, turned away in silence and went out of the shed. Then Lurulu ate the oats and found they were good. When he had had enough oats, the troll returned to the pigeon loft and sat a long while there at one of the little windows looking out across the roofs at the strange new ways of time. And the shadow upon the trees went higher, and the glitter was gone from the laurels and all the lower leaves. And then the light of the ivy leaves and the holm oaks turned from silvery to pale gold, and the shadow went higher still. All the world full of change. An old man with a narrow and long white beard came slowly to the kennels and opened the door and went in and fed the hounds with meat that he brought from a shed. All the evening rang with the hounds' outcry, and presently the old man came out again, and his slow departure seemed to the watchful troll yet more of the restlessness of earth. And then a man came slowly leading a horse to the stable below the pigeon loft, and went away again, and left the horse eating. The shadows were higher now on walls and roofs and trees. Only the treetops and the tip of a high belfry had the light any longer. The ruddy buds on high beeches were glowing now like dull rubies, and a great serenity came in the pale blue sky, and small clouds leisurely floating there turned to a flaming orange, past which the rooks went homewards to some clump of trees under the downs. It was a peaceful scene, and yet to the troll, as he watched in the musty loft amongst generations of feathers, the noise of the rooks and their multitude thronging the sky, the dull continual sound of the horse eating, the leisurely sound now and then of homeward feet, and the slow shutting of gates, seemed to be proof that nothing ever rested in all the fields we know, and the sleepy, lazy village that dreamed in the Vale of Earl, and that knew no more of other lands than their folk knew of its story, seemed to that simple troll to be a vortex of restlessness. And now the sunlight was gone from the highest places, and a moon, a few days old, was shining over the pigeon loft, out of sight of Lurulu's window, but filling the air with a strange new tint. And all these changes bewildered him, so that he thought a while of returning to Elfland, but the whim came again to his mind to astonish the other trolls. And while this whim was on him, he slipped down from the loft and went to find Orion. Chapter 24. Lurulu speaks of earth and the ways of men. The troll had found Orion in his castle and had laid his plan before him. Briefly, the plan was to have more whips for the pack, for one alone could not always guard every hound from straying when they went to the boundary of twilight, where but a few yards away lay spaces from which, if a hound ever came home, as lost hounds do at evening, it would come home all worn and bedraggled with age for its half-hour of straying. Each hound, said Lurulu, should have its troll to guide it and to run with it when it hunted, and be its servant when it came home hungry and muddy. And Orion had seen at once the unequalled advantage of having each hound controlled by an alert, if tiny, intelligence, and had told Lurulu to go for the trolls. So now, while the hounds were sleeping on boards, in a doggy mass in each of their kennels, for the dogs and the bitches dwelt each in a separate house, the troll was scurrying over the fields we know, through twilight, trembling on the verge of moonlight, with his face turned toward Elfland. He passed a white farmhouse with a little window towards him that shone bright yellow out of a wall, pale blue, with a tint that it had from the moon. 2 dogs barked at him and rushed out to chase him, and this troll would have tricked them and mocked them on any other day. But now his mind was full to the brim with his mission, and he heeded them no more than a thistledown would have heeded them on a windy day of September, and went on bouncing over the tips of the grasses till the pursuing dogs were far behind and panting. And long before the stars had paled from any touch of the dawn, he came to the barrier that divides our fields from the home of such things as him, and leaping forward out of the earthly night and high through the barrier of twilight, he arrived on all fours on his natal soil in the ageless day of Elfland, through the gorgeous beauty of that heavy air that outshines our lakes at sunrise and leaves all our colours pale. He scampered full of the news he had with which to astonish his kith. He came to the moors of the trolls, where they dwell in their queer habitations, and uttered the squeaks as he went, whereby the trolls summon their folk. And he came to the forest in which the trolls have made dwellings in boles of enormous trees. For there be trolls of the forest and trolls of the moor, 2 tribes that are friendly and kin. And there he uttered again the squeaks of the troll's summons, and soon there was a rustling of flowers throughout the deeps of the forest, as though all 4 winds were blowing, and the rustling grew and grew, and the trolls appeared, and sat down one by one near Lurulu, and still the rustling grew, troubling the whole wood, and the brown trolls poured on and sat down round Lurulu. From many a tree bole and hollows thick with fern they came tumbling in, and from the high thin gomacs afar on the moors, to name as are named in Elfland those queer habitations for which there is no earthly name, the odd grey cloth-like material draped tent-wise about a pole. They gathered about him in the dim but glittering light that floated amongst the fronds of those magical trees, whose soaring trunks outdistanced our eldest pines, and shone on the spikes of cacti, of which our world little dreams. And when the brown mass of the trolls was all gathered there, till the floor of the forest looked as though an autumn had come to Elfland, strayed out of the fields we know, and when all the rustling had ceased, and the silence was heavy again, as it had been for ages, Lurulu spoke to them, telling them tales of time. Never before had such tales been heard in Elfland. Trolls had appeared before in the fields we know, and had come back wandering. But Lurulu amongst the houses of Earl had been in the midst of men. And time, as he told the trolls, moved in the village with more wonderful speed than ever it did in the grass of the fields of earth. He told how the light moved. He told of shadows. He told how the air was white and bright and pale. He told how for a little while Earth began to grow like Elfland, with a kinder light and the beginning of colours. And then, just as one thought of home, the light would blink away and the colours be gone. He told of stars. He told of cows and goats and the moon, 3 horned creatures that he found curious. He had found more wonder in Earth than we remember, though he also saw these things once for the first time. And out of the wonder he felt at the ways of the fields we know, he made many a tale that held the inquisitive trolls and gripped them silent upon the floor of the forest, as though they were indeed a fall of brown leaves in October that a frost had suddenly bound. They heard of chimneys and carts for the first time. With a thrill, they heard of windmills. They listened spellbound to the ways of men. And every now and then, as when he told of hats, there ran through the forest a wave of little yelps of laughter. Then he said that they should see hats and spades and dog kennels, and look through casements and get to know the windmill. And a curiosity arose in the forest amongst that brown mass of trolls, for their race is profoundly inquisitive, and Lurulu stopped not here, relying on curiosity alone to draw them from Elfland into the fields we know. But he drew them also with another emotion, for he spoke of the haughty, reserved, high, glittering unicorns who tarry to speak to trolls no more than cattle when they drink in pools of ours, trouble to speak to frogs. They all knew their haunts. They should watch their ways and tell of these things to man. And the outcome of it would be that they should hunt the unicorns with nothing less than dogs. Now, however slight their knowledge of dogs, the fear of dogs is, as I have said, universal amongst all creatures that run. And they laughed gustily to think of the unicorns being hunted with dogs. Thus Lurulu lured them toward Earth with spite and curiosity, and knew that he was succeeding, and inwardly chuckled till he was well warmed within. For amongst the trolls, none goes in higher repute than one that is able to astound the others, or even to show them any whimsical thing, or to trick or perplex them humorously. Lurulu had Earth to show, whose ways are considered, amongst those able to judge, to be fully as quaint and whimsical as the curious observer could wish. Then up spake a grizzled troll, one that had crossed too often Earth's border of twilight to watch the ways of men. And while watching their ways too long, time had grizzled him. "Shall we go," he said, "from the woods that all folk know, and the pleasant ways of the land, to see a new thing and be swept away by time?" And there was a murmur among the trolls that hummed away through the forest and died out, as on Earth the sound of beetles going home. "Is it not today?" he said. "But there they call it today, yet none knows what it is. Come back through the border again to look at it, and it is gone. Time is raging there, like the dogs that stray over our frontier, barking, frightened and angry and wild to be home." "It is even so," said the trolls, though they did not know. But this was a troll whose words carried weight in the forest. "Let us keep today," said that weighty troll, "while we have it, and not be lured where. Today is too easily lost. For every time men lose it, their hair grows whiter, their limbs grow weaker, and their faces sadder, and they are nearer still to tomorrow." So gravely he spoke when he uttered that word tomorrow, that the brown trolls were frightened. "What happens tomorrow?" one said. "They die," said the grizzled troll, "and the others dig in their earth and put them in, as I have seen them do, and then they go to heaven, as I have heard them tell." and a shudder went through the trolls far over the floor of the forest. And Lurulu, who had sat angry all this while, to hear that weighty troll speak ill of earth, where he would have them come, to astonish them with its quaintness, spoke now in defense of heaven. Heaven is a good place. He blurted hotly, though any tales he had heard of it were few. All the blessed are there, the grizzled troll replied, and it is full of angels. What chance would a troll have there? The angels would catch him, for they say on earth that the angels all have wings. They would catch a troll and smack him forever and ever. And all the brown trolls in the forest wept. We are not so easily caught, Lurulu said. They have wings, said the grizzled troll, and all were sorrowful and shook their heads, for they knew the speed of wings. The birds of Elfland mostly soared on the heavy air, and eyed everlastingly that fabulous beauty which to them was food and nest, and of which they sometimes sang. But trolls playing along the border, peering into the fields we know, had seen the dart and the swoop of earthly birds, wondering at them as we wonder at heavenly things, and knew that if wings were after him, a poor troll would scarcely escape. Well-a-day, said the trolls. The grizzled trolls said no more, and had no need to, for the forest was full of their sadness as they sat thinking of heaven, and feared that they soon might come there if they dared to inhabit earth. And Lurulu argued no more. It was not a time for argument, for the trolls were too sad for reason. So he spoke gravely to them of solemn things, uttering learned words and standing in reverend attitude. Now nothing rejoices the trolls as learning does, and solemnity, and they will laugh for hours at a reverend attitude or any semblance of gravity. Thus he won them back again to the levity that is their natural mood. And when this was accomplished, he spoke again of earth, telling whimsical stories of the ways of man. I do not wish to write the things that Lurulu said of man, lest I should hurt my reader's self-esteem, and thereby injure him or her whom I seek only to entertain. But all the forest rippled and squealed with laughter, and the grizzled troll was able to say no more to check the curiosity which was growing in all that multitude to see who it was that lived in houses and had a hat immediately above him and a chimney higher up, and spoke to dogs and would not speak to pigs, and whose gravity was funnier than anything trolls could do. And the whim was on all those trolls to go at once to earth and see pigs and carts and windmills and laugh at man. And Lurulu, who had told Orion that he would bring a score of trolls, was hard set to keep the whole brown mass from coming, so quickly changed the moods and whims of the trolls. Had he let them all have their way, there were no trolls left in Elfland, for even the grizzled troll had changed his mind with the rest. 50 he chose, and led them towards earth's perilous frontier, and away they scurried out of the gloom of the forest, as a whirl of brown oak leaves scurries on days of November's worst. That is the end of tonight's reading. Lurulu has watched the earth and found it good, found it more than good, found it the thing he cannot stop thinking about, the thing that Elfland, with all its beauty and all its immortality, cannot give him, because Elfland has never had to end, and Lyrizel has remembered. She has stood in the golden air of Elfland, in the world she was made for, and thought about grey mornings in the valley of Earl, about Orion as a small child, about the cold that the mortal world has and Elfland does not, about all the ordinary things that she did not know she loved until they were behind the border, and the Elf King has seen her face while she remembers. He loves his daughter. He brought her home because he loves her. And she is home. And she is not home. And there is nothing he can do about it, except watch her remember a world that is 20 or 25 miles away and might as well be unreachable. 3 people looking in 3 directions. Alveric east, toward Elfland. Lurulu west, toward the fields we know. The Elf King inward, toward a love that cannot give his daughter what she needs. Something is going to have to give. Episode 8, The Horn of Alveric, will be here soon. Moth is asleep. You can be too. Continue to listen to music by Velicor Dark Academia.